Hey everybody, it's been a long time coming, but I finally have some time to go over what I think the top 10 cards coming out of ARCHAZIA'S Island are. My list has more or less remained unchanged from the release of the set. Obviously, we now have a couple of weeks worth of data from tournaments to kind of sift through and see what cards are actually the most impactful in the meta. But let's go ahead and get started. The first card, we're just going to go in order here. The first card I want to take a look at is Tramp Street Smart Dog. Now you might be saying, Quantum, I thought you were just saying how you got all this feedback from, weeks worth of tournaments. This card hasn't really popped up all that much. Yes, that is true, but the power of this card is not to be underrated, and this is a card that I think it's very good now, but it also has the potential to become absolutely busted in the future. And I've talked a lot about this, and some of you have even left comments on my videos asking about, this is one of those cards that seem to be a little future proof. And the reason why this card is so good is for several reasons. Let's break it down. So the first thing is it's a 7 cost uninkable, or sorry, it's a 7 cost inkable. It is not uninkable. That's huge. High cost cards that are, I don't want to say like your boss characters, air quotes, but cards that you look to really help close out the games with. They need to be inkable. The more that they're inkable, the more playability they have. Think about a card like Maleficent Dragon. If that card was uninkable, a 9 cost uninkable card, still a very powerful card, quest for 2, big body, has a good effect. But if it was uninkable, I doubt it would see as much play as it ever has, right? Because it's just so expensive, and for that card to be a brick in your hand for that long, it's just not feasible. A card like this being inkable is huge for that cost. The quest for 2 is good. The 2/6 stat line is actually very good for this ink pairing for Amber Emerald, and I'll discuss why in just a moment. But of course, the big thing is, well, it costs 7, but you don't actually pay 7. Why is that relevant? Well, because you may end up paying 1 less for each other character you have on board when you play this. So if you have 3 characters on board, you pay 4 for this. It can even be reduced down to 0 where you play it for free. Unlikely, but it could happen. So you're playing this card for likely 3 or 4, maybe even less, and you're getting a good effect to sift through your deck, right? The second effect here, draw cards up to the other characters you have in play. So if you end up paying 3 for this, it means you have 4 characters on board, you draw 4, you discard 4. That's pretty good. That can fix your hand, search for certain combo lines, search for certain answers, whether you're playing the aggro version or a discard version of Amber Emerald, right? Search for your key to Under the Sea combo, any other future combos you might have. Search for that non-questing source of lore in the aggro variants, like the Baloo, like the Gogo Tamago to close out a game with, etc. This card, just very, very good. The discarding aspect of it for the aggro decks can also help you with the Chernobog that you might also be playing in aggro decks, because it helps fuel additional characters in your discard so that it turns on the Chernobog that much faster. So a lot of different ways that it can synergize with the existing card pool that we have in the game right now as of the 7 sets. And it also quests for 2. Now, why is that 2 strength stat line actually important? Actually, the 2/6 is important. I've tested against this card and tested with this card, and it's very good. First of all, it survives Zeus. So if your opponent's going to sing Zeus on it, right, they need some other form of interaction in order to take this out, since Zeus will only deal 5 damage to this card, meaning it will survive with 1. And you could potentially bounce it back to hand with all of the Emerald bounce cards. And that's where the 2 strength comes in handy, because a card like the Muses, if you use this in, let's say, a discard variant where you're singing songs or casting songs, you can trigger the Muses to bounce the Tramp back to your hand. Yes, you can have a reusable, sift through your deck card, play it out again, draw another 3 or 4 or 5 cards, discard those cards, and you keep recycling that ability with the Muses. You can quest with it, bounce it back to hand to protect it, recast it for very low cost most likely, and just keep that angle going, right? Imagine a discard deck that can just find the discard spells when they need to, right? You saw in the LCCC, if you watch those matches, Zan, one of the best players in the world for sure in Lorcana right now, actually lost to Artabax, which was a good matchup for him as an Emerald Steel player versus Artabax's Emerald Amethyst, because he didn't see the cards he needed to see at the right moment. And Emerald Steel is a deck that can lose to itself. He was playing Muses, he was playing all of the control cards, right, with a discard that you would expect to see, but he didn't have the ability, if he didn't have his Diablo or his Beast Tragic Hero, which is what they were playing at the time, to draw cards and find the answers they need for those moments. A card like Tramp solves those problems, and that's why it is the first card, in my opinion, that is one of the top 10 in the set. And it is a dual ink, so, ARCHAZIA'S Island, big reveal, or not reveal, but like their big new contribution to the game is the whole dual ink thing, and I think we're seeing the power of these cards impact the metagame. First of all, with Tramp. Again, may not be a super top tier ink pairing right now. I think it's definitely tier 2 or tier 1.5, a good anti-meta strategy. But this card, you've heard it here, it's one to watch. It's so cheap. Like, I have, I think, 3 foil playsets because I got them for so cheap, and I think 3 or 4 non-foil playsets because, yeah, 25 cents each. It's $1 for a playset. And the upside of this card is crazy. Think about what happened with Doc, right? I mean, Doc is a completely different card, but that's just my opinion on it. Anyways, moving on. The next card, I think, is yet another Amber card, and the Troubadour. When this card first came out, there was a lot of discussion in a lot of groups around, will this card end up replacing the Ursula Ursula Vanessa, which is basically, I guess you can say, ever since it came out, the go-to singer that, I can't even spell Ursula correctly. Ursula. Okay. This was the go-to singer for the 2 cost, right? I mean, it's only been around since set 4. So this being a 1/4 body, singer 4 for 2, means that it can take up to 3 damage, and you can Rapunzel heal it, draw 3. Pretty good. It's singer 4, meaning it sings the critical song at the moment, which is Along Came Zeus. Very, very good card for Amber Steel Song, or just Amber decks in general that we're playing any number of songs. The Ursula name is also very powerful, but we haven't really seen that come to fruition since we only have a good shift target in Amethyst, right? In the Ursula Sea Witch Queen. A very powerful card, but not something that is really a viable ink pairing right now, right? In the Amber Amethyst. So what does the Troubadour actually do? Well, is it a level up? It's a 1/3, but it has resist 1, and it's also a singer 4. I think a lot of Steel Song players have gravitated towards this card over Ursula, or is playing this in tandem with the Ursula, because it, in a steel-oriented meta, which we are kind of in, right? We see Sapphire Steel, we see Amethyst Steel being 2 top decks in the metagame right now. If you're somebody that wants to play Steel Song, I think you gravitate towards this card over the Ursula, because the resist means that it's just that much more resilient, and being able to stick a singer on board, survive challenges, survive those Storm Rage combinations, Strength of a Raging Fire combinations to out your singers. This card, I think, is definitely a step above the Ursula, at least for now. That might change, but it's definitely not a bad card to have in your arsenal, and it is, in my opinion, one of the top 10 cards coming out of this set, because if Steel Song ever comes back in a big way, and it's always going to be a relevant deck, right? The whole new world interaction of being able to disrupt your opponent's hand, clear their board, empty your hand, sing a whole new world, replenish 7, you have a board, they don't. That's been around since set 1. It will continue to be a viable strategy for, as long as, I guess, they let it be. And every time we think Steel Song is going by the wayside because, the Sapphire decks, especially Sapphire Ruby becoming a thing, it just keeps coming back, right? Watchuk did a stream against one of his friends, I guess, or locals, where he played, I think, a 1st to 10 with Steel Song versus Red Blue, Ruby Sapphire, and it was kind of 50-50, right? It was really play draw dependent. So if you play a really good Steel Song player, I think that's a testament to, the deck isn't dead. The good players will still be able to find the lines of play in order to outrace you, in order to control the board state, to get their game plans off. So Steel Song, any card that's good for Steel Song right now is going to be a card that's worth something in these future sets. And that's going to do it for me for the Amber section. Moving on, it should be... Oh, let me filter by set 7. I'm scrolling through past sets here. But moving on to the next ink pairing, it should be no surprise. We got 2 dual ink cards so far. Will the Amethyst card... Is there going to be an Amethyst card, and will it be dual ink? Well, again, it should be no surprise that you guys would expect, if I can actually find where it is, which apparently I cannot. There it is. Nope, not Tekka. Psych. I gotta go scroll back down. It is the Giant Cobra Ghostly Serpent. So a 3-cost inkable, super good right there. 4/4 body. I don't know what it is with Amethyst getting these overstated cards for their cost here, but a 3-cost 4/4, that's pretty good. Now, when I first reviewed this card, the Vanish ability I said likely wouldn't be too impactful unless Steel was a very big force in the metagame, and right now it is. So things like Storm Rage, Strength, even hitting it for 1, obviously Storm hits it for 2, will take this card out despite not dealing the full 4 damage because it's an action that will target this card. Your opponents on the Ruby cards, I mean, Teeth and Ambitions isn't really a thing right now, but if they, Sapphire coil this down to a 2/4 and then brawl it, I mean, it's getting banished regardless from the brawl, but obviously that is still an interaction. It doesn't get banished for the simple fact that it's targeted by an item. It has to be an action as per the wording here in the brackets. But why this card is so powerful is not really for, it's an overstated body and it has a limitation, so you kind of have to balance those things out. It only costs for 1, but it's the Mysterious Advantage. because I'm telling you guys, when I played high level players who were playing this card, they wiped the floor with me every time. Like I think I played 3 high rated players and I could not beat them. I was playing Sapphire Ruby and Sapphire Steel, and with the Amethyst Steel pairing, they just outraced me. I just could not deal with it, because what they would do is they would play a little bit more of a control game, where they would play the Cobra at a specific time, maybe not on 3. And whether they were on the Dock build or like a Merlin Rabbit build or a more tempo oriented draw build, they would always have a hand, right? And I'm not playing discards, so I'm just trying to keep advantage with them, race them, develop board states, manage the board state, etc. But they would play the Cobra, and they would discard a card, obviously, gain the 2 lore, and then they would like bounce it back to hand, right, with a snake or a fox or whatever. They usually wouldn't leave it on board. And this really interested me, because I'm like, yeah, like it's nice because, as a 4/4, it can stay and contest the bell that, the Sapphire decks play for free. But when you know that they have that card bounce back to hand, I don't know if it's just me, but like it changes your psychology of how you approach the game, because now you're always constantly thinking like, all right, yeah, they're on Amethyst. I know they have a giant Cobra in hand. I know at any point in time they can pop 2 lore. I know they have goats. I know they have other ways to gain lore without questing. So I constantly have to worry about making plays to either outrace them, because I cannot stop the Cobra coming down and just gaining 2 lore instantly, let alone if they have 2 Cobras, right? And 4 cards, like 4 cards in hand, 2 of them being Cobras. That's an instant 4 lore. Like, how do you stop that? And we know Amethyst decks, right? They're poking you with Diablos and Chernobogs and whatever, and then they're kind of gaining lore here and there with like Goats, Bounce, and whatever else. And then just having that threat of the Cobra in your hand, right? You played it once already, you discarded your card, maybe you played a Dock, replenished your hand a little bit, or a Rabbit, maintaining tempo, Sing of Friends, etc. So they always have a healthy hand state, and like this card single-handedly put Amethyst Steel ahead of Ruby Amethyst, in my opinion, for set 7. Ruby Amethyst has historically, for the first 6 sets, always been an ink pairing that has been superior, in my opinion, to Amethyst Steel. Amethyst Steel was always around in a couple of variations, and it was decent last set, but Ruby Amethyst was still better, in my opinion. And I think that was proven, right, over the course of like some big tournaments. Like, I mean, Ed was the pilot, so that's kind of an unfair advantage when you have one of the best players in the world piloting the Ruby Amethyst deck. But there were definitely a lot of good players piloting Amethyst Steel as well, but it just didn't put up as many results as Ruby Amethyst, obviously winning 2 of the biggest tournaments, and I think it was Battle of the Bay and obviously the North American Championship. But again, that was Ed piloting the deck in both instances. Now with Amethyst Steel, this card does a lot to give the Amethyst Steel deck basically its own identity in kind of focusing on the burn package. And I think if you guys watch Speci, he really focuses a lot on the burn cards of, his deck is structured a little bit differently than maybe like a tempo-oriented deck. It's more of, I think, like an aggro burn deck. But like that's how much this card does for the Amethyst Steel pairing. I'm taking a lot of time on this card because it is a very impactful almost meta-defining card, really, because like I said, you have to constantly, if you're playing against Amethyst Steel, you pretty much constantly have to always be thinking about, well, at any point in time, that Cobra is going to come down, and that's just 2 lore, right? We all know how it felt when Goats would hit the board and it would put the opponent to 19, and now you're like, well, now I have 1 turn to try to win the game, because I can't get the Goat off the field because you would win the game, and then if I pass the turn, you just quest with the Goat and win the game anyways. Now we have to worry about that on 18 lore because of the giant Cobra, and it accelerates the pace of the game for Amethyst Steel, right? It makes it faster for them. It means that they can close out games even if they're in a weak board state, because all they need to do is race you up to a certain amount. Before it was like maybe 16, 17 lore. Now they can maybe just race up to 14 lore and then just close the game out with a couple of cycles, right? So very impactful card. And one thing I will say before I move on from this is I'm happy that this is an uncommon. I will probably do a separate video just commenting on potential barriers to this game now, because we are starting to see that, right? Like, you can't really play Amber competitively if you don't have Rapunzel, which is an $80 Canadian card at the moment. You can't really play Sapphire. I mean, you can, but it's becoming harder to play Sapphire effectively if you don't have the new Tamatoa Happy as a Clan, which is pushing upwards of like $90 Canadian for a copy, which is close to $400 for a playset. Like, this card is one of the last remaining bastions of an ink pairing where you can build a budget-friendly deck with Amethyst, because there are no high rarity, like super impactful cards that you need for the deck. At least not yet, but that's a separate topic for a different video. Let me know in the comment section below if you've made it this far, if you are interested in that. So that is going to do it for my Amethyst cards, unfortunately, in what I think is going to be the a top 10 card coming out of this color. Again, things might change as we see future sets, but I don't really see anything here being too impactful. Like, I know a lot of people were hyped up on this queen. Again, it suffers from the 4 cost problem with Amethyst. Like, this card, I'd rather just play a rabbit, I'd rather just play a goat, honestly, and then I have to wait a turn to exert it. My opponent probably deals with it, especially in a Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel meta right now. This card always gets outed before it can even trigger, right? So, and then it has a condition that your opponent has to have the certain cards in the discard for it to trigger. It's a good card, it's just not where it needs to be right now in order to be impactful. The next card I want to take a look at, and man, there are a couple of honorable mentions that I could go over here, because I think things like this Baymax Giant Robot with the Universal Shift is good. I do think that the Ink Geyser is actually, it was really hyped up at the beginning, and then it kind of really died off. But I do think it's a decent card. But the Emerald Sapphire Ink pairing just isn't quite there yet to compete. Like, it's good in theory, but it's just not quite there yet to compete. Maybe it gets there over the next couple of sets. But for those reasons, these cards are not making the list. But the card that will make the list is, yet again, this is the 4th dual ink card in a row, the Pete Space Pirate. Now, this is a card that I did kind of write off a little bit in my initial ink reviews for the set prior to its release. But after seeing it in play, this card being $1 right now, I picked up foil and non-foil sets. Thankfully, I got the foils before they spiked, but this card is a good card for several reasons. One, inkable. We've already talked about that with the Tramp. Very meaningful. Amazing stat line in a 5/5. Quest for 2, great. Shifts for 4, and you actually have great shift targets in the Emerald and Steel ink pairings. On the Emerald side, it's really just Morph right now. I don't think you really want to play the 1-drop Pete. I think the Clarabelle is still better for the kicker ability to banish items. But on the Steel side, you have arguably one of the best cards in the entire game in the 3-cost Pete, Games Referee. So, whoa, why? Oh, cassette 7, that's right. So if we take that off, there's a lot of there's a lot of Petes. Okay, this is the Pete that everybody. If you play Steel, you're playing this Pete. Doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what kind of Steel deck you're playing. You are playing Pete. And I've talked about this card. People were playing 2 or 1 or no. You're playing 4 copies of this Pete. It's that good, right? And there's a reason why the foil has just been on an upward trend, and it will continue to be on an upward trend. This card it's a floodgate, right? It literally buys you a win. It buys you a turn. It's just an amazing card, and it will continue to be amazing because actions, songs, etc. will continue to be a core mechanic of the game. We'll continue to get very powerful ones moving forward, and this card stopping any tempo-oriented play that your opponent is trying to set up is going to be relevant for a long time to come. So you play this on 3, you slow your opponent down, or you play it later on when it's going to actually be impactful, and you can shift it on the next turn if you're playing it on curve for 4 with this Pete. Because once your Steel Pete for 3 comes in, you don't really care too much about losing that card as a character, because it came in and it did its function as stopping your opponent from playing actions on the next turn. Yes, you do still lose the body, which is a 3-cost 3/3, which is still decent for its stats. But if you can upgrade it to this Pete, you're not probably worrying too much about, yes, I'm losing the 3-cost 3/3 Pete, that's a body, because you're replacing it with something that's so powerful and can exert itself right away. And its ability when it's exerted is, when this character is exerted, opposing characters can exert to sing songs, and your pirate characters gain resist +1, it quests for 2. So you shift it, you quest for 2 instead of questing for 1. You have a resist 1 5/5 body that's a 6-cost card that can sing 6-cost songs, or really just 5-cost songs, because that's where the good cards are right now. But the resist +1 for your pirate characters, which includes itself, is also relevant, because what other pirate card do all Steel decks play? And I've said this many times if you watch my videos, the best 2-drop in the game, Mr. Smee Bumbling Mate. Imagine you play a Mr. Smee on 2, you quest, okay, it takes the damage, you play the Pete you play the Mr. Smee on 2, then on turn 3, you play the Pete, and you quest with the Mr. Smee, you take a damage, so the Smee has 1 damage on it. Turn 4 comes around, your opponent didn't deal with the Smee, you shift the big Pete now onto the small Pete, you can quest with the Mr. Smee, he has resist 1, he does not take any damage any longer. So now you have an indefinite quester that doesn't have the drawback of dealing 1 damage, because you have a captain in play, but also it has resist 1, so meaning it's even harder to challenge, right? That's That's actually crazy. Is the Pete a captain? I don't even know. It is not a captain. Okay, so you will still take the 1 damage, but because of the resist 1, you will not take it anyway, so it didn't really matter if it was a captain. But even if your opponent was trying to run over it after the fact that you kept it on the board, and they didn't deal with it before you got this Floodborn Pete down, now they have to get over it with a 4 strength or more character, or 4 strength or more damage. Well, I guess you could say 3 strength if you got 1 damage on it already, but again, you can curate your plays to not quest with the Smee. Wait till you get the resist ability on this Pete down, and then start questing with the Smee so that he's nice and fresh and doesn't have any damage on him. So a lot of synergy with the Emerald Steel pairing. This card is phenomenal, insofar that I think Emerald Steel can finally break away from its basically defined identity for the past couple of sets, where it's only been played as a discard deck. You could potentially play like a Floodborn oriented control deck that isn't focused around Bucky, obviously, since it was errated, or even an Emerald Steel Song deck where you can leverage Clarabelles and Diablos for your card draw, a lot of the Steel Songs for removal, and then just powerful questers, right? Like, there's potential options there. Again, hard to say with the metagame currently in a Sapphire meta, but undoubtedly this Pete is insanely powerful for the simple fact that you have a good shift target. It just goes to show you guys, when you look at cards like shift cards, Floodborn cards that seem very good but they're very expensive, there's 2 main things that I generally look at. One is it inkable or not? If it's not inkable, it takes a lot of playability off the table, right? Think about Elsa Spirit of Winter. If that card was inkable, it would have changed the dynamic of that card entirely. But the second thing is that really matters on whether or not a card is playable or not is, does it have a good shift target? As soon as a card gets a good shift target, like think about Chapter 1 Aladdin. That card is actually pretty good, but it really doesn't have that really good Aladdin to shift onto. When it does get that Aladdin, that Chapter 1 Aladdin might become very good. And so the part of the reason why this Pete is so strong and why it's a top 10 card in my opinion is simply because it has such a good staple, really, shift target in the Pete Games referee. So let's go ahead and apply filters here so that we're not endlessly scrolling looking for what we want to find. ARCHAZIA'S Island. So I think we've gone through 4 so far. What else is going to be a top 10 card? Hopefully I don't glaze over anything, but I think that was going to be my only Emerald pick for now. Like I said, there were some honorable mentions in here, but overall I think we do have to pass. Okay, so not meta related, but number 5 is another dual ink card in my opinion, and I really think that this ink pairing still is not being explored enough, probably because everybody who's super competitive just wants to do Sapphire things, since it is, you know, the ceiling for the power level of the format right now. But when you read this Mushu card, this is, I mean, obviously it's a custom card for this ink pairing. Like, no, you cannot print this card as a steel only or ruby only card, right? Like, it has to be printed for an ink pairing that is so down bad that a card like this just instantly propels it into relevancy. And you know, Ruby Steel had some legs in the previous set. It wasn't necessarily great, but it wasn't necessarily devoid of any value either. It could still do some things in the metagame, especially at local levels where, you know, localized metas, it can really run over aggro strategies, etc. But now you can actually contest with a lot because of this Mushu. So this is a 5-cost inkable 4/4 body that quests for 1. Okay, it's inkable. Again, super great. 4/4 for 5, not the worst. Quest for 1, sure. The abilities is what makes this card absolutely cracked. Whenever one of your characters challenges, they gain resist 2 during that challenge. So I've already showcased on my channel where I was able to absolutely just destroy my opponent's board with a Scar coming down. Every time it challenged, it gained resist 2, and I also gained 2 lore, because that's the second ability. During your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore. So not just challenging for the 2 lore, but you have to banish the opposing character. So Scar, as an example, whether you have the Mushu on board first or the Scar on board first, during the turn you're going to challenge, you drop the Scar. Okay, there's a lot of things with Scar on them for some reason. Maybe we have to custom filter this a little bit more, just so you guys have some context. This Scar comes down, it has rush. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready him. And then he has 5 willpower. So he comes down, he challenges right away with the Mushu on board, and he has resist 2. So he probably takes 1 or no damage from the challenge. He banishes his character. He readies himself up from his own ability. He gained 2 lore as well, because the Mushu gave him 2 lore when he banished that character, and he gained resist +2, meaning he survives very nice and healthily to challenge the next character. You challenge into that next character, you gain 2 lore, you have resist +2, you likely survive that interaction, you likely banish that character since he has 6 strength, running over pretty much everything in the format, aside from like Big Tamatoa, and then he readies himself up again. And he just completely wipes out an exerted board. Now, that being said, your opponent will likely have to play very, very differently if they see Mushu and or Scar as a potential threat on the board, knowing that that combination of cards will absolutely either just lose them the game on the spot, but also just wipe out their board, right? It's an insanely powerful interaction, an insanely powerful card, because you can also do it with something like, I guess I'll search for this here first before I filter back on, the Pyros, where this card coming down first, right? And then if your opponent doesn't deal with it, when you're ready to start challenging with this card, you drop the Mushu, and then you're like, great, Pyros challenge, ready himself up, gain the 2 lore, get resist +2, and just continue to banish all of the opponent's exerted threats. The only downside is these cards, Scar and Pyros, can't challenge readied characters. If they could, that would have been amazing. The card that you could use to allow them to challenge readied characters, which is a lot of combo setup and it's not really practical, even though I did almost do it in my matchups where I showed on YouTube, where I posted the matchups, where you have Mulan Imperial General. This card banishes an opponent's card in a challenge. Then your other characters will gain that they can challenge readied characters this turn. So then now your Pyros can just wipe out the rest of the board, whether they're exerted or not, whether they have ward or not, it doesn't even matter. Your Pyros is wiping everything out. Or your Scar, as an example, right? So yeah, it just goes to show you like how insane this card can be, because it gives your challenging character the ability to survive an interaction because of the resist 2, and then you also gain lore in the process. So you might be thinking like, yeah, I could be questing instead of challenging. Now with this card, it solves both of those problems. You don't lose the card in a trade out from a challenge, right, because of the resist 2, and you gain 2 lore. So the amount of advantage you can generate with this Mushu is absolutely crazy. Could you imagine a card like this in any other like Ruby or Steel deck that isn't Ruby Steel? Just think about that for a second, right? And how busted this card would be in any other Steel and or Ruby pairing that's not Steel Ruby, right? That's why this card had to be printed for this ink pairing, because it would just be way, way too good in anything else. So this is a card, I mean, the price here, even though this isn't a meta card, the price here reflects that the market knows how good this card is. And it's not a bad investment if Ruby Steel gets additional support cards in the future, right? Like these are 2 ink pairings that are easily the most 2 represented inks in the game, but they're just paired with support colors like Amethyst, like Sapphire, etc. But they're not really paired together because they kind of do the same thing, right? They want to just remove stuff from the board, and that's why you pair them with like more support colors. Do you end up getting a top tier version of Ruby Steel in the future? I'll tell you what, if you do, if Ravensburger does print those cards for Ruby and or Steel, or the dual ink cards moving forward, you're going to want Mushus to play that deck. So I'm just pointing that out. It's a fantastic card. It's definitely one of the top 10 cards out of the set for me personally. Even though it may not be a meta relevant deck type or deck pairing right now, it's definitely like a card that you cannot look over that card and just think like this card is busted, right? In the context of what it is. So we're 5 cards in. I have no idea how long this video is so far, but let's go ahead and keep going here. I think that's actually going to do it for the Ruby section. And all right, nah, you guys already know. Do I really need to go over it? Number 6 is going to be Scrooge McDuck. Now, I talked about this card a lot already, so I'm not going to go over a lot of the same things I've already said, because those of you who watch my videos already know the rundown on this card. I'll never not flex the fact that I pointed out that you should have been pre-ordering this, because the pre-order prices, one of the few cards, rare, you should never buy pre-orders, except for the times where you can clearly see a card is undervalued, and this is one of the cards, right? Just like Clarabelle was when I pointed that out. The Scrooge McDuck is definitely a card that is a top 10 card out of this set, because it's a 4-cost 4/4, and you see streamers, in tournaments, casters, etc. talk about this. It being a 4/4 body is really important. Just being a big body on the board that can contest stuff, whether it be locations, aggro decks, what mid-range decks, etc. Being a singer for things like how far I'll go if Sapphire decks are still playing that, or the Steel songs that are all 3 cost, right? Like the Strength and the Storm, etc. And being a 4/4, it can survive a lot of like challenges, right? It runs over the opposing bells on the Sapphire mirrors, etc. And compounding the fact that this is a 4 cost 4/4, that's obviously just very basic, right? Like vanillas have that stat line. This card you can play for free if you have 4 items that you exert. That's pretty good. That's broken actually. Yes, having the 4 items in play can be a bit tough. You're likely not playing this for free on curve. You're likely paying the 4 if you're playing this on turn 4. But later on in the game, you can get this out for free. And in certain matchups, especially in the Sapphire Ruby deck, if this card is played in Sapphire Ruby, which, depending on the version of Sapphire Ruby you play, you probably don't play the Scrooge McDuck because you're not playing that critical mass of items. But you compare this with the Sapphire Coil, and again, I have a video on my channel showcasing this, and the Scrooge McDuck basically just runs over everything because you Sapphire Coil things down, and then the Scrooge McDuck can just challenge them and take them out for free, right? And again, that's going to cause your opponent to be like, I'm not going to quest with my stuff because I don't want to leave them exerted because your Scrooge McDuck with your Sapphire Coil is going to take it out for free. I cannot afford to go more negative on my card advantage because I'm playing against Sapphire and you guys are already plussing like crazy on all your cards. The ink pairing or the ink color itself is broken no matter what you pair it with. And then to top it all off, it has an aerial spectacular singer ability in look at the top 4 cards of your deck and put an item card into your hand. So similar to Ariel, look at the top 4, put a song in. The Scrooge McDuck solves a big problem for a lot of Sapphire decks and trying to find those popsicles and trying to find potentially those lucky dimes as well. Just grab that item. The main thing is, well, it just replaces itself. So it's card advantage, right? You got a big body on board. You potentially played it for free for tempo, right? Because there's costs associated to play the ink or whether you play this for free. And then it replaced itself, helping you find an item that you probably would want to find anyways, right? Because your whole deck as a Sapphire deck usually will revolve around items unless you're playing the aggro variant. To be fair, the only deck that seems to solidify this card as a staple in their deck is the Sapphire Steel control-oriented deck, not the aggro version of Sapphire Steel. And like I said, depending on the Sapphire Ruby variation, it looks like the Shark variations are coming to the forefront as the top tier version, again, over the item-oriented versions, but that doesn't mean the item-oriented versions are bad necessarily or that they won't get better in the future. Obviously, Scrooge McDuck will continue to be a phenomenal card. And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier around printing these legendaries. Ravensburger has historically been very good by printing powerful cards, not as the legendaries, so to keep their prices down and to make the decks accessible. This card, it's going to run you $100 for a playset in USD. Like I think in Canadian dollars, this card is already $35 each, right? Which is $140 for a non-foil playset. So if you want to play Sapphire, it gets kind of expensive, and we all know Sapphire is considered the top tier deck of the metagame right now. So that is our first, what is that, number 6, right? Our first non-dual ink card that's a top tier card. The next one is yet another Sapphire in the Bell. Undeniable. This card was definitely overhyped, but I think it was warranted because the card is really like that good. The fact that you can power creep Cinderella is insane to me. Again, Cinderella is a standalone. Play it on turn 1. Yeah, you just need an inkable card. Bell, you need the inkable card, you need an item, and then you need the bell. So it's a kind of I don't want to say a 3-card combo because you'll always have an inkable card, right? But you need an item in order to play this out. The Cinderella, you don't. Cinderella is much more vulnerable. This card is not. This card is not inherently weak to things like Brawl, Small Sisu, etc. This card is also a 3/3 body that can help contest the board. It single-handedly kills Flynn Rider, basically, the Ruby card that Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel would fear generally when they would go up against the Ruby Amethyst decks. This card is insane. You have an instant card that can just start dealing with any kind of aggressive deck for the simple fact that in Sapphire Steel you can start singing Storm and Strength. Even in Ruby Sapphire, where I even talked about it, like you may not want to play this card because you don't have the relevant songs to sing with it, it's still an okay check because you can banish things like the Unconventional Tool if you're opting to play that variation. It just gives you an additional way to banish that in addition to Hiram. as well as just being a big body on board that helps slow down aggro. Because what has Ruby Sapphire traditionally struggled with? It's decks that are really fast, and even though you have good efficient removal like Brawls and Sisus, the decks still get underneath you, right? Like Emerald aggro decks, like the Amethyst Steel decks, they only need to aggro you for a little bit, then they can close out the game, like we just talked about with Cobras and Goats and whatnot, and you have no way to stop them. Well, I mean, you do in now Pirate's Life and things like that, but for the item variations, a Bell can help slow down that aggressive push against like Amber Steel Mine decks. Like this card, I don't want to say I haven't seen an Amber Steel Mine do well actually since the release of Set 7. Maybe I haven't looked at as many tournament reports. I don't know if you guys in the comment section want to let me know. But Bell really slows that kind of deck down too, right? Like, you want to play a Calhoun or a Smee on turn 2? Sure. They're some of the best 2-drops in the game, but I played my Bell for free. Well, I paid 1 for my Bell, banishing an item that I just get back later on with the Tamatoa, so it doesn't even matter. And I'll trade out your 2-cost card that, yeah, is normally pretty good, but you turn it sideways or you opt to challenge it to mine, and that's a tempo advantage for me because you paid 2 ink to play that Calhoun or Smee, and I played this Bell for 1. Yes, I lost my item, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not too important. So yeah, the Bell, not much to really comment on there. It's pretty obvious why it's so good. So that's number 7. Number 8, of course, what might actually be the best card in the set. I talked about the Scrooge in previous videos potentially being one of the best, but I think it's come down to like the Tamatoa. If you're playing Sapphire, every single Sapphire deck will play the Tamatoa, whether you're an aggro-oriented version or not, because this card, like I think even Artabax's aggro variation, where he's not even playing Hiram, he's still playing Fortispheres and Popsicles, and he's still playing Tamatoas, right? Like just think about that. You're playing Fortispheres and Popsicles, you're not playing Hiram, and you are still playing the Tamatoa. Actually, let's go ahead and take a look, because I'm pretty sure his deck should be trending, because he's in the LCCC. No? Are you kidding? Nah. Artabax's blue steel list isn't around here anywhere. There it is. It's way down there. Okay. And we know Artabax, when he came out last set with Emerald Amethyst, everybody was copying it, right? Once he won that big tournament, and Emerald Amethyst was a deck that was threatening the metagame. But when we take a look at this here, oh, he is playing Hirams. Never mind. Why did I say he wasn't? I thought there was a variation that wasn't playing the Hirams, but I guess it is too strong. And I guess I wouldn't really categorize this as an aggro deck. I mean, I guess you kind of do. Like, it's not like Harlan Sweet's aggro variation. I mean, McDuck Manors, Smee's, Lawrence's, it is an aggro deck, right? But it also is kind of control. I guess it's a mid-range. I mean, he calls it aggro, right? I mean, the Bells, the Grandmas, the Petes, these are control cards. I mean, any, like I said, any steel deck, whether it's aggro or not, you're playing Petes at 4 anyways. Yeah, I guess I would consider it aggro. But I guess my point still remains in that as an aggro deck, you're still playing the Tamatoa, whether or not you're playing Hirams. Like, you're still playing the Tamatoa, you're still playing these items, because the card advantage that this gives you, the ability to heal up your cards, the ability to protect your cards even with Fortisphere, like these items' abilities actually come into play. The 1-cost items are just too efficient, and bringing them back with the Tamatoa, it's just crazy. Like, how nice of them, putting a Fortisphere and a Popsicle in each of the Enchanted's claws there, right? Do I need to say more about this card? I mean, a 6-cost Inkable. Inkable? Great. 6 cost? Great. 4/5 stat line? Should have probably been like a 2/5. But I'll take a 4/5. Quest for 2? Why does it quest for 2? It probably should quest for 1. It's already like, just vanilla stat-wise, it's already like just not the worst. But then, of course, what puts it over the top is when you play this character, get back 2 Popsicle and or Fortispheres, or anything really. Like, this card can help recur things like Poisoned Apple, Sword of Truth in the Ruby deck. So if we take a look at the cards here, go Ruby and go Items. The Tamatoa recurs removal. The Tamatoa recurs Banish Chosen Villain character. It recurs Banish Chosen Hero character. You have to pay 5 for it, but, you know, it's like a custom Dragonfire that you can just use as a toolbox once it's in your discard pile. It also grabs back on the Ruby side. Not that it's really played all that much, but potentially Poisoned Apple. Force Exertion so that your Shark or Aladdin or whatever can banish an opposing character, right? Take out that threat early. Pretty good. But for the most part, you're taking out, or sorry, not taking out, but you're recurring back Popsicles and you're recurring back Fortispheres, right? I mean, you could recur shields as well. Just good, efficient one-cost items. I mean, you could also get back unconventional tools, play them, banish them, play things like Sapphire Coils for free, get back Sapphire Coils if you were forced to banish them with Hierom and or Bell to play them out, get the draws off, etc. You were find them, flatten them, where all your items get banished. Doesn't matter. Tamatoa comes back, recurs them anyways. Either Tamatoa, right? So the simple fact that you have all of these cards at your disposal is really just crazy utility. If I can even find where the card is again, probably not. Oh, okay, well there's the enchanted version, which brings up the same version anyways, but absolutely insane ability. And then to top it all off, your opponent sees this come down, you already plus off of it, right? Because you play this card, you get a body on board. That's actually a good body, 4/5 for 2 quests. You get 2 items back from your discard. Now you're like, okay, yeah, you just got your advantage back off of the Tamatoa. And now I'm like, I have to get this card off the board. I have to exert resources, spend my resources to get a card that already went plus off the board. And that's why Sapphire is the best color in the game right now, because of this card, right? This card comes in, gets you advantage right away, and then you put a threat on board that your opponent says, I cannot let this live. I would love to wait and challenge it or whatever, but now I have to do something awkward to get this card off the board. I have to play cards in my deck to deal with this Tamatoa. I have to play more copies of Zeus. I have to play, different removal options, because I can't let this thing turn itself sideways. I cannot let this Tamatoa quest, because if it quests, you're potentially playing a very powerful item. Obviously, the one that comes to mind is the Lucky Dime for free. Undoubtedly, this card is the best card in the set. So that's why it's demanding a $100 plus price tag, which again contributes to the problem of, well, is this game now becoming a little too pay to win? And the answer might be yes, because the Sapphire Ink pairing seems to be gate kept by this Tamatoa now, similar to how Amber is kind of being gate kept by Rapunzel ever since the first chapter, to be fair. So yeah, it's a tough ask. So what was that? Card number 7 or card number 8? I think Belle was 7, Tamatoa was 8. And oh man, like it's actually crazy, dude. Because the next card, number 9, is actually another Sapphire card. All of the non-dual ink cards, the only non-dual ink cards that have made it onto my top 10 list are all Sapphire. And while every ink got a coil, it's the Sapphire coil that's clearly the best one of all. And the foils have been on an upward trend lately ever since that CCS 13K, where it was 3 Ruby Sapphire decks in the top 4. And the only Ruby Amethyst to make it in the top 8 got to the top 4 and still lost to Ruby Sapphire, where we all thought that match was great, right? In the previous meta, Ed showed that. But even Ed's deck, when we talked about it, I did a deep dive on Ed's deck, and how it was so well positioned into Ruby Sapphire. He had to build it to be well positioned into Ruby Sapphire, because even its traditional form, where it did traditionally beat previous iterations of Ruby Sapphire, didn't really do as much, and now it definitely doesn't do as much. So much so that Ruby Amethyst doesn't really get played even all that much, at least right now. Maybe people will cook up something, but I think it's pretty clear that Ruby Sapphire is a force to be reckoned with, right? People thought Sapphire Steel was going to be tier 0. No, we're not in a tier 0 format by any means, but the closest thing to becoming tier 0 is definitely Ruby Sapphire, in my opinion. And Sapphire Coil is the card that really makes that happen. Now, this card, you look at it and you might just think, oh my gosh, like, why would they do this? And to be fair, I think that too. Like, this card is very, very good. It enables small Sisu, big Sisu brawl, right? That's, Medusa. Like, those cards get infinitely better because of Sapphire Coil. But this card does have a cost. And it's a cost that you might not inherently think like, yeah, like ink, like I ink every turn. Like, no, not necessarily. Because once you start getting up to the points where this card matters more, which is the end game, you probably don't want to ink as much. And you probably can't ink as much because you need certain cards in your hand in order to deal with end game states. And the fact that you're forced to ink to trigger this ability is where this card can actually hurt you a little bit, right? Where you're like, I need to ink to trigger the Sapphire Coil so that I can play my Sisu, but I can't ink because the only card I can ink, or, you know, if I use my Fishbone and try to ink or whatever, I'm inking a card that I actually need. So I got to make a choice, a difficult choice. Which line of play is the one I need to go for here? Whereas you didn't really have that problem with Ice Block. Now, Ice Block is significantly worse still, in my opinion, because it's uninkable. It does cost 1, which is a huge benefit, but it only reduces by 1 as well. So not nearly as powerful, but the Sapphire Coil, if you do have cards in your hand, that's where this card becomes just like, it's free, right? Like, it's like, yeah, I can just ink whatever. I got like 5 cards in my hand. I got my Hiram up. I got my Workshop engine going, whatever. I'll just ink and just turn on all my removal. Yeah, this is also one of the best cards in this set. It might be top 3 along with Cobra, I think I was saying was top 3, and the Tamatoa. Tamatoa being number 1 for sure. But yeah, number 9, Sapphire Coil, right? Should be no surprise that when you pair this with any of the Ruby removal that, well, I searched Banish as a keyword, but Sisu, reduce your card down to 1 strength, banish it. Brawl, reduce your card down to 2 strength, banish it. Big Sisu, wipe out everything. I have multiple coils in play, or I ink multiple times, or I ink multiple times with multiple coils in play. My Big Sisu wipes out your entire board. I'm sure you've heard of people saying, like, I was able to reduce down a Chernobog from a 9/9 to a 1/9 because I had double coil and I inked twice in a turn, right? Once for a turn, once off Fishbone, reduce by 2, reduce by 2, reduce by 2, reduce by 2, -8, play a small Sisu because it doesn't cost me anything to reduce by 2 in terms of ink. I have to ink 2 cards from my hand and set up my 2 coils, but that's relatively simple when I'm playing a deck that can draw so many cards. And then I take out your big threat that you work so hard to develop. Imagine a little Sisu banishing a Chernobog. Just think about that in terms of Disney lore, right? Maybe it is sufficient. I don't know. I don't think I've seen the movie with Sisu in it. My wife has. I haven't. But that's just wild to me. So that's number 9. And looking at my list here, it turns out that one of the Sapphire cards actually did make my top 10. And it is Ink Geyser. And it's Ink Geyser. So going back, maybe a bit of a surprise. It is Ink Geyser for the simple fact that similar to Mushu, where the Emerald Sapphire deck isn't necessarily something that is seeing super competitive play right now. Similar to what Mushu can do for Sapphire Steel, I think Ink Geyser can do for Emerald Sapphire. And I think it's still very underexplored at the moment. And I do think we still need better cards to synergize with this ink pairing. And we probably will get them in future sets. But there's already some very interesting interactions with this card. Obviously, bouncing back the opponent's cards or putting them into their inkwell with the removal options that you have on Emerald and Sapphire respectively is good. But think about this. I have a Clarabelle on board, and then I Ink Geyser you. End of my turn, the Clarabelle triggers and I draw like a ton of cards. Right? I mean, Ink Geyser hurts me as well, right? Because I lose cards as well. But let's say you have 4 cards in hand already. I have 2. I ink and then am able to shift my Clarabelle for 5 and play the Ink Geyser because I'm ramping, right, with the Sapphire color. So I'm able to get up to 8 ink relatively comfortably, and it makes sense because I don't have many cards in my hand because I am aggressively inking. But I'm playing to that Clarabelle, shift on Morph or shift on a Clarabelle name, and then I have 3 ink left over where I'm able to play the Ink Geyser. Okay, so I have 8 ink, right? Let me just double check to make sure that, because I haven't actually tested this combo out. But let's go Clarabelle. Shift is 5, right? I've played Clarabelle. How do I not remember? Yeah, shift 5. Okay. So you have 4 cards in hand. maybe I've been bouncing your cards back, so you don't really have too much of a board. Somebody did this to me, by the way. This is why I'm quoting this. Yeah, you go Clarabelle, you have nothing in your hand now, and then you ink geyser me. And, let's say you have 7 ink or whatever. You have 4 in hand, you go, okay, pick up 4 cards. I pick up 5 cards. I have 5 cards in hand. You have 9 cards in hand now, right? Wait, no, 4. And you had 7 ink, 4. Oh, no, sorry, you have 8 cards in hand now. Now Clarabelle procs to draw 3. I have a board, or a better board than you, because I've been bouncing your cards back or putting them into their inkwell with the emerald and sapphire forms of removal. I have a Clarabelle on board now that is basically impossible to deal with because you only have 3 ink now. So for the next couple of turns, this Clarabelle is going to be doing some work, plus whatever else I have on board. And like a simple combo like that is the power of Ink Geyser, right? There's also a lot more that you can do, like setting up the Universal Shift Baymax. And I talked about this as an honorable mention. This card being able to turn anything into a 5/5 body that quests for 2. If I deal with just part of your threatening board, if I just deal with your most important threats and then I drop this Baymax and then I Ink Geyser you, you have 3 ink next turn. How are you dealing with this Baymax for the next couple of turns? How are you progressing anything on your board that I've left on your board with this Baymax? This is a 5/5 card that I've shifted on top of like a Tipo. I turn my Tipo into a Baymax. And which means, by the way, I ramped with the Tipo. So instead of shifting on 4, I shift on 3. The ink pairing will eventually become good, I think. And I think a big reason is for that control-oriented version is because of Ink Geyser. So this one actually made its way into my slot at number 10. And just thinking back to my notes around why I thought this was number 10 makes sense. So that is my list, guys. I do have a listing somewhere here. Where's the one with all of the... Oh, there it is. Oh, I recently looked at it. Okay. What did I... Oh, I think I recently updated to add the Troubadour on, and I took something off. I mean, I edited this a long time ago. I was probably just looking at it, like, a while ago. But, I'm recording this video, obviously, on the 27th, late at night. But... there it is. There's the list. 1 item, 1 action, 8 characters. Anything that's not Sapphire is dual ink. Anything that's single ink is Sapphire. 9 of them are inkable. Only 1 uninkable in the Ink Geyser, which just goes to show you how important inkability is. It's very, very hard for a card to be uninkable and be like a top tier card in my opinion. I mean, there are examples that exist, like Be Prepared and whatnot. Look at the overwhelming... Oh, never mind. I thought that was the Sapphire. I was like, that can't be right. No, yeah. 8 characters. Yeah. 1 item, 1 action. But still a decent spread. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Half of the list is Sapphire cards. I'm surprised that I ended up putting 2 Amber cards on here. 2 Steel, technically, right? 1 Amethyst, 2 Emerald, or 3 Emerald actually, which is weird because Emerald is probably the most underrepresented. I mean, to be fair, there was that big event that I think 3 or 4 Emerald Steel lists topped in the event, but yeah, let me know. Anyways, if you made it this far in the video, I know this was probably a long one. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. If you agreed, did I miss anything? Do you agree with my reasoning or not? If you made it this far, though, thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.